I would say always focus on improvement, on a personal level. Always try to learn. And the most important thing that I think we lose quite a lot when we're kids, never lose curiosity, right?
You are meeting a prospect for the very first time, and you are entering into a conversation with the hope of making a sales at the end of the day. How do you break the ice? How do you eventually penetrate into the person's mind to the point of saying, yes, I want to buy?
In general, you can always use the SMART principles in any type of communication, especially in sales, and kind of understanding where you get with them. But I think the most important part is, if you want to be really effective, is you have to divide your time, right? How much time do you speak, and how much time do the prospect's clients speak? Who didn't watch the previous video, and this is a continuation of the discussion that we had with Obehi. I'm Risto. I'm myself Macedonian. I've been in sales for the last 8 years. I'm also a football coach in my free time, so absolutely love working and coaching and mentoring, which really helps in sales. Previously had a background in politics, did my master's in European studies, also my bachelor's in languages, and had the opportunity to work for Royal Caribbean, so traveled the world a little bit, from continents that I've not visited. Only Africa is missing, but that's my next stop. So Becky, maybe you can help that
Absolutely.
there with some suggestions where to go and what to see. And as I said, the experience is mainly in sales, mainly in B2B. I've been on all sides of sales in terms of cold acquisition, warm acquisition, managed smaller, larger teams, done everything that there is to be done in terms of the strategic approach, negotiations with customers, where we're going to go as a sales team, what our strategy is going to be, what our approach is going to be, etc., etc. But I'm not going to go into too much details because we'll spend the next hour discussing basically just that communication and negotiation and how you can connect it with storytelling.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that, Risto. The last conversation that we had was really very beautiful. I see how much people appreciate it. And of course, it's something that will continue to get traction as we move on. And of course, we didn't manage to finish the conversation there on sales. Of course, that means we had another chance to be here again. And now we're going to be talking about the role or the effect of effective communication and negotiation in sales. And yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, let's start with communication. How important is effective communication in sales? How do you see the importance?
I wouldn't say only important. I would say it's crucial, right? If you're not communicating your value proposition, if you're not communicating your strong suits, and you're not communicating how you're meeting the customer's needs, then you're absolutely missing the entire point of the conversation you're having with your potential clients or current clients. So the best communicators are usually also the best salespeople. The reason, at least for me, for that is the fact that basically, in order to communicate well, you should be also able to listen very well. And I think that's one of the underrated skills of communication. We assume that communication is only speaking. We assume that communication is only us telling our own story and convincing the customer that this is what how they need to do it, where actually in practice, it's actually quite the opposite. It goes down to the fact of how well are you able to adjust your conversation to your prospect or potential customer, and how well can you communicate to them, in the sense of how are you meeting their needs and how are you actually providing the solution to the issue they have. And in order to do that, again, you have to go back down to listening and understanding, and that's the vital part of communication. And I think what has makes a huge difference is also understanding culture in terms of communication, right? You have nations where hand gestures and movements are very
Like
important,
Italy, for
and
example.
I like Italy, for example, where you self-sit, right? Um, but also you have very quite a lot of nations that are very non-verb, like verbal, right? And they're also very nations where you don't really get a lot of hand motions, but they're very brief and laconic, so to say, right? And that's also something you need to have in consideration when you're having a conversation with someone. What's their background, where they're coming from, how do they communicate, how do they want to communicate, and most importantly, understand what are they trying to communicate, right? If a customer keeps telling you they're not interested in something and you keep pushing that product, service, or whatever the case might be to them, you've completely missed the point of the conversation, and that's probably going to be your last conversation. So that's some of the aspects of communication that you always have to have in consideration, and you always have to adjust based on what your counterpart is, right? Or who your counterpart is in this particular case, right? How they want to understand, or how do they understand what you're saying, and how can you best bring your story to them, to the point where they say, okay, this is actually something I would like to have, and this is something I would like to buy. And that's probably going to help you close that deal fairly quickly and seamlessly.
Thank you so much for that. All right, now in terms of somebody grabs in the real tool of sales, which you describe as communication, where should people really start from in trying to understand the power of communication in sales?
Um, from the very basics, I think you should always have three questions on top of your mind whenever you start any kind of conversation with any potential client, prospect, whatever you want to call them. It's basically understanding the basics, right? Um, why they're talking to you, what they're talking about to you, and how do they want to be communicated. And once you have, I think that's also one of the best books that I've read in terms of like marketing. It's done from Simon Sinek, if I'm not wrong. The why, right? The circle of why, and that's basically the three questions. And even though this could be applicable to negotiations as well, I think it's very applicable to communication as well. It's really you need to understand who is standing in front of you, why are they standing there in front of you, and how are you going to get them to basically get that deal signed or get that deal done. And after that, once you have those three basic principles cleared up, it's much easier to go into the communication and know how to communicate with them.
Today, we are intentionally saying effective communication. That is how we are titling the episode today. But
Yeah.
what really make a communication effective? How do you describe effective communication in sales?
I would say effective communication is the one where you get most of the things done in the shortest period of time. If you have to use some kind of a metric that's actually tangible, right? In general, you can always use the SMART principles in any type of communication, especially in sales, and kind of understanding where you get with them. But I think the most important part is, if you want to be really effective, is you have to divide your time, right? How much time do you speak, and how much time do the prospects clients speak? And if it's not 50-50, I think you've really missed the point, because you're not really getting the information you need to adjust your storytelling, to adjust your pitch, to adjust your proposal. And you are absolutely not listening to what the needs are from the customer and potential customer again. So basically, it's a very balanced, it's very nuanced approach, and then obviously you have to measure it. So that's when we say effective ideal case scenario would be with a deal closed, right? That's the effect of having good communication. But I don't always think that that metric is the only metric that can be used. In general, a deal maybe not going to happen this month because there is no budget, but it might happen in a month or two or three or four or maybe even a year. Sometimes there are cases like that. But building that relationship can also be considered as an effective communication, right? You've built the trust, you've built the understanding, you've built a relationship, and then you can nurture and use that relationship further down the line to actually conclude the deal and make that potential customer your customer, or extend the lifespan of the customer for substantial period of time, obviously. So I think that's roughly how I would define effective communication. Being able to listen, understand, and reply. And then once you are able to do that, it sounds very simple, but it's not. When you're in theory, it sounds extremely simple. In practice, it's actually quite a different thing, because we as human beings have a tendency to respond. And I always suggest, especially when you're doing negotiations and you're doing communications, and I'm gonna tie these two together this time. Take at least 3 seconds before you respond. Breathe in, breathe out. Give yourself some time to think of a proper response, or potentially not even responding. Some people say it's a sales tactic, right? You are letting the other person take the lead, but I don't see it that much as a tactic. I think it's something that Japanese businessmen use very successfully. Even though they speak English, they have a translator with them to help them translate whatever is being discussed. Some in the business community consider this a sneaky tactic, so to say. It's like delaying communication, but I understand it completely differently. I think it's a really nice approach, because it gives you this delay where you kind of listen to understand and then respond, right? So absolutely, my advice when doing effective communication and when trying to achieve something is to take the time before answering. Base your answer on what you understood, because you listened carefully, and then reply.
All right. That delayed communication or delayed tactics in communication, why is it effective? How is it? What is the best way to leverage it when you are in the sales environment?
I think it's really simple. Sometimes me as a football coach, I always say the best football is simple football, but it's the hardest football to play. And it's, I think, the simplest tactic, but it's the best tactic when you're. It's not even a tactic, it's really an approach, because it gives you the opportunity to really understand. I think most of the time, regardless if it's a private environment or it's a business environment, we just listen to respond, right? And when we listen to respond, what we basically do is we are preoccupied with our own thoughts. So what we listen is what we want to hear, and not what really needs to be heard. Sometimes a customer says, I don't have a budget, which is a general objection that you get, but we're not really asking an open-ended question. Is what do you need me to do to help you secure that budget? So that's the difference between, I would say, this delayed approach, where you kind of thinking of solutions rather than asking a simple question, and then the approach where you just ask a question. And I think effective communication, also to tie it back to your previous question, is really asking open-ended questions, right? Asking the actual potential customer to tell you what they need and where they stand, instead of you asking a yes or no question, because then it's not really a communication. You come with a theory that you have, and you have it confirmed in that conversation, but you didn't really communicate. You just had a conversation, and that conversation led nowhere. So it ties down to that as well, right? You're using the delay in a sense of like, did I understand that correctly? And if you didn't, it's fair enough. You can repeat it back to the customer and say, look, I understood you said you don't have the budget, but you're currently looking to secure budget. Is that correct, right? And then the yes and no question is probably a good question, but then you should actually come up with a open-ended question. How do we secure this budget? Where do we get this budget from? Where can we get it from? And in that case, you open up the prospect and the customer to start talking and discussing, and to tell you potential solutions of the issue he wants also solved, right? Because if you're having a conversation with someone, or if you're communicating with someone, you actually have to listen to their end, and you need to help them. And they're there because they're interested. They're not in a conversation just to waste their time. So it's also about how you set yourself mentally before the conversation. If you're there thinking, oh, this deal is never going to happen because this guy has no money, um, that definitely isn't effective communication, right? You go into a conversation with the purpose of finding a solution and finding a compromise, and that also ties down again to the question, what is effective communication? That is effective communication. You go in to find a compromise to an issue you both know it's there and needs to be solved.
Thank you so much for that. All right, now let's imagine a scenario. You are meeting a prospect for the very first time. You are entering into a conversation with the hope of making a sales at the end of the day. How do you break the ice? How do you eventually penetrate into the person's mind to the point of saying, yes, I want to buy?
I think I need to take a step back from your question, in the sense of like, I don't need to set myself up in the sense of like, this person needs to buy. He's already in the conversation. So he wants to buy, like otherwise he wouldn't be there. And in the end of the day, it's not really about if he wants to buy. He would buy from whoever solves his problem the most or the best or the most effective or cheapest, right? So you are going there already on a secure conversation. So you both know that there is a need, right? You both know that there is an interest in something. What I generally try to do is humanize the communication very, very much, because to me, I'm still, maybe call me old fashioned if you want to, but I'm very much a relationship based seller. And that's what I want my team to be as well, because trust and relationships cannot be replaced. At the end of the day, when you trust someone, sometimes it's not even the pricing. We've had situations where customers have stayed with us because the relationship is good and they got better pricing somewhere else, but they didn't go because they want the support that they get. They enjoy working with the person that they're working with, and they don't want to replace it for €1 or €2 less or more, €1,000 per year, €2,000 per year. So prices is not always the determinant in the decision. So that's why I say, if you don't build the relationship from the start, you will not going to have a successful process further down the line. Even when you secure them as a customer, they will eventually churn because they don't feel loved. Regardless of what you're selling, at the end of the day, you buy an iPhone repeatedly because you feel something, or you feel some kind of a connection, or it is a status, whatever the case might be, right? So you are tied down to the product or the service one or another way. And that's my initial thought when I go into every conversation. It's like, okay, what do I know about the person that I'm going to be speaking to? What can I do to break the ice? What kind of a phrase? Usually, I check. LinkedIn is a good source for me personally. I like it because I can see potentially languages that they speak, and then maybe say something in their own language, tell them a story about the time I was in their country, if I was in their country, or connect it to something that's more on a personal level. Sometimes it works a charm, sometimes it doesn't. In most cases, I like to do the introductions at the very beginning, because people say things that they're interested in, right? Like, just like yourself, you asked me, tell us a little bit about yourself, right? Why would people watch this video, and why would people would watch this podcast? And then people listen to my story and they're like, okay, this guy maybe has something interesting to say. And that's where you get your tip on what to say next, right? If somebody says, hey, I'm interested in football, congratulations, I'm also interested in football. I figured out something that we can talk among each other fairly easily, and then that becomes our topic, and then it breaks the ice for us, and then we can start a conversation, right? You have situations where it's actually very professional. People don't want to talk about anything personal. They want to stick to business, and with those people, you also have to have a business approach. Then I wouldn't use the word bullshit them, but it's literally don't bullshit them, right? You go directly to the point. They want to hear numbers. They want to hear how you're solving their issue. Then just go down to that. That's also a nice way to communicate with people. If you actually, and you can ask. I even done that. I've asked people in a conversation, what is your preferred way to communicate? And if people say, I want to hear the numbers and I want to hear the money and I want to be out here in 10 minutes because I don't have time, sure, we do it in 10 minutes. This is the price. This is what you can get. This is what we can do for you. bye bye. I mean, I would like to be treated that way. I'm sure, I'm sure yourself as a human being, you also respect when somebody respects you, right? You go into a conversation, you tell someone, hey, listen, I've heard about your product, I know your service, I don't have time, I'm in an important meeting in 10 minutes. What can you do for me? I need a solution. I'm gonna the one being the one who's gonna pay. So what can you do for me? So that's, set the stage right. Ask the question of how people want to be communicated. Sometimes you don't have to, because sometimes people will just immediately tell you, they want to have a relaxed conversation. You can discuss different topics. You can discuss cars, football, I don't know, whiskey, cigars, whatever is your preferred topic. And sometimes, no, they just want to discuss numbers, and that's also fine.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, if we were having those people that come around and say, "Okay, I'm leaving in 10 minutes. I'm going for the bar. Tell me what you can do." That would be really very interesting all the time, no?
Exactly. I mean, that's why you in sales you have an elevator pitch, right? If you're a good salesman, you should be able to describe any product in a minute or two, right? That's the elevator pitch. You need to. I think I've seen lately it's this frenzy about ChatGPT and explain this to me like to an 8-year-old kid or a 10-year-old kid, and that's exactly sales. You have a product. I don't care how complex it is. You need to be able to explain it in 2 minutes what it does. And if you can't explain the benefits of the product or the service in 10 minutes to a prospect who actually understands, because I mean, let's face it, I'm not going to be ending up in a conversation to buy a nuclear power plant if I don't know anything about the nuclear power plant, right? So it's not very common that the prospect or the customer is there just to have a conversation, right? They know, they're in the industry, they understand what the solution generally does, or they understand how it can help, but they want to know how it can help them, not how it can help in general.
Now, let's say you are the one that is interested in this client or this prospect. So you are the one that is digging. Therefore, you are the one that is doing the research. Tell me about the research. What you would like to find out more. How you will be able to find out more information about this prospect, so that when you are talking to the person, you are talking from a background that you understand more or less where they are coming from. Because you talked about also culture before. Before you can
Yeah.
talk to them from their level of culture, you mean you already understand their culture. So tell me about the research you will do before you meet a prospect.
I generally research every company before I speak to them. I want to understand what they do, how they do it, where they do it, why they do it, if they have it on their website, right? I want to see financially in the news where they stand, what's happening, is there a CEO change or whatever the case might be, right? I find for myself usually as a detective, so to say, that LinkedIn really helps, because people list quite a lot of stuff there, and they like posts or they post something, and it shows you where they stand. Sometimes they have 2-year or 3-year anniversary in the company. Sometimes they like to post about a topic that's common to us, and that background helps you immediately kind of set the tone of the conversation. um, if none of this was available for some reason, never miss on the actual introductions. I know it's boring to listen to 2 minutes of like people talking about what they do. My position here at this company is this and this, and I buy stuff, and then they're like, oh God, let's just go through this. But it's the wrong type of approach. It's really the wrong type of approach. In those 2 minutes or a minute, regardless of how much the potential customer will speak, you are able to get quite a lot of information. Sometimes they will say, most people want to say that they're interesting. Nobody wants to say I'm a boring person, right? But we just have the wrong approach to things, right? Um, if you're thinking, oh, I'm here just to make these 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or an hour count, then you're going with the wrong approach. If you're going in that conversation with this mindset that, hey, look, I'm going to be speaking to someone who's an interesting person who probably has done quite a lot of stuff in his life, um, then potentially you will learn quite a lot about the person and you will develop a relationship. I had a case yesterday when we spent, I think, 15 minutes speaking to a client about the housing market, because he lived in an area which is fairly expensive, and he was like, oh, I will never be able to buy this house. It wasn't relevant to the meeting that we were doing at all. And potentially we could have used those 15 minutes different, and talk about business and goals and numbers. but it was a conversation where he himself was trusting enough to open up of like what he's going through personally. So in those cases, you listen, you can share your opinion obviously on the topic, but now we are in a different type of a relationship. Right now we have the trust to speak to each other, and then we know that if there is an issue, he would speak to me and he will get to me and tell me, look, I'm experiencing this type of issue, I want to get this solved. Or the contract that we have, we need to change it because we're running out of budget, whatever the case might be. Your prospect clients shouldn't be afraid to speak to you. They should be able to come to you and tell you everything they want to tell you, because at the end of the day, if you're going to make it's almost like a normal relationship, right? The business relationship is fairly similar. Both of the parties have an interest for it to happen. It's how do you find a mutual ground where this works for both of you. So somewhere you will need to lose and somewhere you will win. But if you're not really created, if you haven't created this channel where you can have an open communication, and if you haven't really created any kind of personal relationship with them, I think it's going to be really hard for you to kind of either close the deal or maintain the relationship. So the more you can discover about the person, the more effective your communication with him will be, and the more it will get you places.
That's so valuable. It's so valuable. I remember, for example, what we continuously do here. There are, except on a few occasions, I usually will write down the question I'm going to ask. Oftentimes, I don't write it down. When I ask my guest, tell me more about yourself, you tell me something about yourself, then I ask you more about yourself again, then you go on. In those few minutes that you explain yourself, your background, where you are coming from, of course, we do this more in the other part of the storytelling that we do here, which is African diaspora storytelling, because we're really very deep in the storytelling in that sense.
Yeah.
So by the time you finish to explain your story, your background, your father, your mother, I already basically know where the conversation is going to go. So I am so interested in your story that when I'm telling you to tell me about you, we're just flowing. We're just flowing. We just flow. It's not just because, okay, I know that I'm going to ask you this question, so this is what I'm going to be paying attention to. No, I'm going to be paying attention to what you are saying. So, yeah, it is me that is asking the question, but you are the one actually leading me, because based on what you are saying, I'm asking the next question because I'm just clarifying what you are saying. So I think this is very important.
Yes, I think, and that has a lot to do with how you set the conversation from the very beginning. And you said from the very beginning we're going to have a discussion on effective communication, and we're going to have a discussion on negotiations. We left it very open framed, right? These are two general topics, but I think what's really important is, and why the conversation is going very well, is because we're both setting up examples and saying things that happen in real life, that have happened to me, that have happened to you, and you've been in those situations, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, how would you define it, right? Or what did you do, what you think was effective? And then it's easy to have a conversation, because you're not speaking of something invented, speaking about something that has happened to you, that has worked, that hasn't worked. I think in defeats you learn much more than you learn in victories, because usually when things don't go wrong, that don't go right, and they go wrong, you sit down, you're thinking to yourself, what did I do wrong? And yourself being involved in storytelling this entire time, and speaking with so many different different types of people, with different types of story, you kind of figure out how to take the story out of them and how to give them the space to express themselves. And that's, I think, kudos to you for being able to do that. Get the best out of your speaker or guest in this case. And it takes exactly what I was mentioning earlier, this effective communication where you listen more, and then the questions kind of lead the conversation very freely, because it's easy to ask when you understand what the speaker is saying and where he's going. And it's much harder when you have a prepared question and then you're switching topics, right? Because then you just have a structured conversation which goes nowhere, because the questions were planned for a different type of conversation, but the conversation developed completely differently. So, that's a little bit similar to what happens in sales, right? You go prepared and you're thinking, oh, I have this plan, I'm going to say this, the customer's going to say this, the potential customer's going to reply like this. No, that's never how it's going to happen. I think, and I have to tell you, Obehi, I think communication skills are the most expensive skills in today's world. And this is not a critique to anyone in person, but I think this younger generation of people are too busy being on their phones, being on social media, and communicating only via phone, via messages, and it creates a large gap of them being able to communicate effectively with people on the other side, because they don't really speak to people that much. I was lucky enough that every single job that I've had was talking to people, getting people's stories, meeting quite a lot of interesting people. I doubt that there is a country in this world that I haven't met someone from. But in order to be effective in that communication, you need to be willing to listen, and that's a skill that has really declined lately. People are on TikTok and they have 5-second videos, and their attention span is only 5 seconds. And you can't be successful in any job anymore if you don't have social skills. And social skills means active listening and ability to negotiate based on what you hear from the other party. And negotiations are not only sales negotiations. Negotiations are literally anything that has to do with a decision where two parties are involved.
Now, talking of the younger generation, and of course, people that are in sales, and also because we are talking of effective communication, please, can you list me maybe some of the key points that people need to pay attention to for them to be able to have effective communication?
Yeah, in sales again, I think it goes down again, going back to the attention span, right? I was mentioning that in my previous answer is, if you're not able to go with the right mindset in the conversation and dedicate your full attention to the conversation you're having, you're not going to be effective communicator. I'll give you an example. I'm talking to you now and you're asking me a question and I'm doing this, right? I'm on my phone, and I'm not actually listening to what you're responding to me. That type of a communication will never be effective. If I'm not interested in the topic, but genuinely interested, then that communication isn't going to be interested. Isn't going to proceed, right? Because I don't listen to what you're saying to me. I'm there because I have an interest to be, because I have to be, and I'm sitting there and doing literally nothing, and then after 5 or 10 minutes, you as a prospect, you go, what am I wasting my time for? This guy isn't really interested, right? He doesn't really listen to what I'm saying to him. I'm telling him this is not what I want, and he keeps telling me the same story in circles, right? So you, in order to be effective, especially if you are a beginner or very early a junior in your career in sales, you need to learn how to listen, and then some more listening, and then how to ask effective questions. And those questions all have to be open-ended questions. Only then are you going to be able to set yourself up for success. If you don't listen, you're going to miss the main points. And if you don't ask the right question, you're going to drive the conversation in the absolutely wrong direction. I'm telling you, hey, we're having an issue with the budget, and you're telling me, so when can you sign? If I'm sitting on the it's like, when are you going to stop having issues with the budget? That's the absolutely wrong type of communication. Like, you have to ask the question is, what seems to be the problem, right? How can I help you? What type of materials do you need from me to secure this budget? Can this budget come from another department that was also impacted? Maybe they can get a buy-in, right? So you are now throwing out ideas there to the customer or potential customer, and he's now thinking of solutions, right? But if you're just closing off the conversation with questions that have zero meaning, or they bring zero possibility for the potential client to answer with an actual answer, and tell you what the issue is, then you've closed off the conversation, and then it's going to be a 10-15 minutes conversation that's going to end, and potentially you will never close that deal. Also, you need to bring value, right? To the conversation, not only to the to the customer in their mind of why they can buy it and why they should buy it, but also a value to the conversation. If it's an enjoyable conversation, If it is something that the customer really enjoys doing, and he's thinking, oh, this guy's, I don't know, funny, this guy is really knowledgeable because he's telling me, hey, this is your issue, this is what I've seen, this is what not working well, how are you going to fix it? And then I'm thinking to myself, you tell me how I can fix it. And then where you go, okay, these are the type 3 or 4 solutions that I have. I'm going to be very happy, right? Because I can go back to my boss and say, listen, we have this issue, we're losing, I don't know, 100K a year. I have the solution, 1, 2, 3. You don't have to say that, Obehi told me. Your boss doesn't care. Your boss cares about, at the end of the day, your boss cares about you providing the solution. The business cares about saving that amount of money so they can reinvest it in something else, and everybody wins. So if I can be a trusted advisor, if I can be a trusted partner to speak to, I've achieved everything that I needed to achieve from a conversation.
And that is really very effective. It's really very effective. Now, before we move into negotiation, there is something that you said that I really find a lot of value in, which is the idea that you are actually more inclined into relationship selling. Now, please tell me, how does effective communication help you in that? Why did you subscribe to that as your approach to selling?
I work in SaaS, obviously, and in SaaS, you always need a champion. You always need someone on the other end of the deal that's gonna push this deal through. And in order to have a champion, you have to either convince them that you are the right partner to work with personally, or you need to convince them that there is a value. But in order to do that, you have to be effective communicator. You need to be able to break it to his English. Let's say it like that, to his language, right? Because some people understand numbers. They want to see an Excel sheet. They want to see how the numbers come out, what does it spit out, and then they say, okay, this actually makes sense to me in my analytical mind. I'm good. Some people want trust. They come to a conversation, they talk to you for a while, and they're like, nah, I don't like Obehi. I'm not buying from him. It has happened. Then you have a situation where a customer doesn't trust you because or a potential customer doesn't trust you. They come to the conversation, you're like, yeah, but you're just giving me numbers. Why should I trust you? This means nothing to me. You can produce as many numbers as you want, right? So you're not really aligning to their expectations, and that's, at the end of the day, nobody's going to buy something they don't want, right? Or if they buy, if you somehow lie to them and convince them that they need to buy it, they will eventually churn. So it's double the work, because now you've wasted a lot of time and they will never return back to this company again. So that's why you need to make sure that you do create a type of a relationship where you have mutual trust, you have mutual respect, and then you share with each other the right type of information, right? Because regardless of how good of a research I can do and figure out things about you over here, or I can figure out for any potential customer, it doesn't mean I know you. I rely on the information you give me. Let's say I'm selling a software to you, right? You come to me and you tell me, I need this software to be actively working on the 1st of May. I need it to make me this much money, and I need it done now, right? I need a plan of how I'm going to do this, right? You literally told me what you need. And then 2 weeks pass and I replied to you by sending you pricing, right? Nothing else. I've sent you pricing. What's your instinct? Are you going to buy from me? Probably no, right? Probably no. But let's say like this. You came with the same 3 questions again, right? But I prepared a plan and I told you, okay, this is when the implementation can take place. This is the type of information I need from you. This is the type of buy-in that I need from you, right? I need you to secure this internally. I need you to send me this data, and then I can prepare and make sure everything starts running on the 1st. This is the amount of money you will invest. This is the output you're gonna get, right? This is the ROI you're gonna get. This is the amount of money you're gonna earn by investing in this. This is how many hours, working hours, it's gonna save your team, and this is how much time you're gonna save generally as a company, right? So which of the 2 approaches do you think will work better?
Of course, this last one is obvious.
Exactly, right? Because I'm doing quite, I know it sounds like I'm doing quite a lot of work that you should do, uh, but at the end of the day, that's why you're paying. That's why you're buying a service or a software, or whatever you're buying, right? Because you want to minimize the impact it has on your organization, and maximize the actual output. So basically, the benefits you're going to get out of it. So that's where the relationship building starts, because if you can, communicate the right way, and understand what the customer actually wants, understand what he actually needs, because maybe he needs to push this deal through the organization, and in order to do that, he will need someone who's trusted to provide him with the type of information he can go and convince people about him. um, that's building the relationship. And let's say we're talking to a current customer, is the same thing, is how much do you do to make him look good.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Now, the second part of the conversation, of course, is about negotiation. And I think that is also very important to be able to make sales in business. Now, what is even negotiation? Can you help us clarify that? Of course, this is from the background that you have worked in politics, you have worked with NGO, you have worked with different organizations, both the profit and the non-profit, which, like I said in the last time, you are really a very good candidate to talk about this conversation. So help us understand what is even meant by negotiation.
I think negotiations is the part of daily life, right? You negotiate with your partner where you're gonna go and eat. Sometimes they agree to your choice, sometimes they don't. You negotiate for profit, obviously, or you negotiate in business environments. You negotiate with yourself sometimes, right? You don't want to do things, and then you try to convince yourself. So negotiations is absolutely part of normal life. And the better you get at it, the more you're going to be successful in any aspect of life, in getting your way. Not to say to manipulate, but that's absolutely wrong. That's not the purpose of negotiations. The purpose of negotiations is finding the solution, in my eyes, that fits both parties that are involved in this negotiation, right? So in order to do that effectively, you need to understand what red lines are. Most cases we have red lines in any negotiations, right? I'm not willing to pay this amount of money because simply I don't have it. I'm not willing to do this now because I don't have the time. I'm not able to buy this product because I don't see the value of it. And that's my red line. I'm not going to do it. So we need to understand first effectively what the actual red lines are for each party, and then also for me as someone who's selling, what are my red lines, right? Am I going to be able to offer that price? No. Am I going to be able to offer those terms? No. So you need to know from the beginning very clearly where you stand in the negotiations, and then work towards a common solution for both sides, right? If you know that the negotiations cannot be met, sometimes it's better, like the terms cannot be met, sometimes it's also good to stop the negotiations because it's pointless. But in most cases, if both parties are showing up to the negotiation table, that means that they want to find a solution. And if you go with the actual mentality, we're gonna find a solution, you will 100% find a solution, right? Because let's say me and you have to discuss something over here, and I tell you I need you to be there at 1 p.m. And you tell me I'm not going to be there at 1 p.m. That's never going to happen, right? And I go there at 1 p.m. and you're not there. You obviously don't want to negotiate. This is not negotiable for you, right? You're not going to make it. You're just telling me from the start that you're not going to make it. But if you say to me, listen, I can't make one, but I can make 105. So I want to meet you, or 110. It's obvious that you're interested in the conversation, right? You want this proposed deal between me and yourself to happen. But you have some limits as to how this can happen, and that's the most effective part, to understand how and what type of how you can bring the deal to an end, and what do you need to do to bring the deal to an end, because the why is already clear, right? The why is very explicitly stated from the very beginning. We are interested to make this deal happen. Why? Because it's in the best interest of both parties. So you know that's the preset that you need to have for successful negotiations. um, and then you can discuss of like, what's your style of negotiation. You have different types of styles of negotiation, which some people prefer to come out as bad cop, good cop situation. And I've seen salespeople bring two people in the meeting, so one can be the bad cop and the other one can be the good cop. You have negotiations that are fairly straightforward. Both parties explicitly said, okay, our only concern is we need to discuss basically the price, and then you just go into the conversation, and you just discuss the prices and you meet at the point where you need to meet. But in general, I think if you're speaking specifically for sales, and we're speaking specifically in concluding a contract, it is very important before the final negotiations or certain negotiations happen that you clearly outline what you're going to be negotiating in that meeting. So that's why transparency before the meeting is really important. I'll tell you, for me, what has worked very, very well always is I negotiate most of my commercials orally, right? We're in a meeting now, and I ask you, Becky, where do you stand with your budget? And you tell me, you know what, I have roughly 10K for this. And I tell you, listen, I can maybe do 12. That's best I can do. And you say, I will need to get some buy-in, but eventually we reach to a point where we both meet, right? So the difference here between us was like, I don't know, 2K, right? Conversation is done. I send you the contract with the terms we agreed. Now we're locked into contract negotiations, and then you don't talk about the price anymore, and this deal is for you also concluded. So I think that's, for me, that is a trick that has done miracles, in the sense it has passed that mental barrier. What are we discussing? We're no longer discussing if this deal is going to happen. The deal is happening. Now we're discussing contractual terms. So it's a bit of a shortcut in the sense, because you've potentially skipped some steps, but it's also because I've already secured the buy-in, right? We agreed on the pricing. We were in this conversation. You said this is a pricing that will work for you. And then you can go to your organization and say, look, I secured us some good pricing. Now we can discuss, how we pay it, when we pay it, what else can we get for it. So, there are different types of techniques to move those conversations forward.
Skills are very important for us to learn, and negotiation is one of those skills, because we see it play out in very many areas. Of course, you have a background in politics, you understand what I mean. That currently there is a conflict going on between Israel and Palestine, and of course now that also include Iran. At the point, somebody might say, okay, hey, let's try to make peace. Let's try to make peace. Is going to involve negotiation. Somebody's going to stand up and say, okay, let me talk to Iran, and then talk to Israel, and then ask Israel, what do you want? And go to Iran and say, Iran, what do you want? Then at the end of the day, there's going to be a kind of a compromise. It's not going to be only a win for one side. It's going to be a win-win for one side, and also a lose-lose to both sides. In that, at the end of the day, they both come to a compromise. So it come up all the time. It come in business, it's come in relationship, it come in every way, like you actually put it out. But there's something that I really find very interesting in the beginning of your response to this question, in that you are not talking about manipulation. Okay, that piqued my interest. What is manipulation in negotiation? How do we notice it? In what sense does it usually appear?
I've met colleagues of mine who say, I don't care as long as it's signed, right? So I will promise the world to you, and I'll give you everything you want to hear, and then you can end up signing the contract, and that's for me manipulation. Making promises that you can't fulfill, you can't fulfill, nor do expect to fulfill. But giving the false impression to a client that this is going to happen for sure, which is absolutely not true, because then the other party ends up in a situation where they're absolutely disappointed with the service when they actually pay for it. And legally, you're going to get the money. Let's say, I don't know, you agreed 10K for a year. At the end of a year, they will cancel, right? They will cancel their subscription or whatever the case might be, and they will never longer return. You got the 10K, but you've got someone who is definitely never going to recommend you and never going to work with you again. And you've lost a potential partner that could have brought, I don't know, thousands and thousands of euros for you. So manipulation on the long run is the absolutely stupidest thing to do in negotiations. You've seen that in politics quite a lot. you sign a commitment to something and you don't do that eventually, or you just never implement the discussion or whatever was agreed. And you have that, there's a joke from Churchill, if it's like, if you want to get nothing done, just form a committee, right? So you just, in politics, you form a committee for everything, so to make sure that things don't happen. In sales is a completely different thing, right? Because in politics, certain negotiations you can't enforce, right? If you, let's say Israel actually negotiates with Palestine a ceasefire, there's no way for Palestine to enforce this, right? So Palestine will just talk about the commitment not happening, but there's no way to enforce it. In sales, it's a bit different, right? Contracts are contracts. So yes, you can enforce the contracts, and you can eventually end those contracts. You've lost some money, unfortunately, but at the end of the day, you don't have to pay the price for a longer period of time. What I've seen used as a way of manipulation quite a lot in sales is, beyond the false promises, is that describing and storytelling about the amazing stuff of the actual platform, software, whatever the case is going to do for you once you get it, and then that actually never works. Or manipulation is you not believing your product is actually good, but trying to sell it to someone else. And I think people can see through that. Most of the customers can see it, and they don't really sign. But you have 10,000s of different things that you can say throughout the sales process that never come to fruition, and then you have a disappointed customer. But also, using the weakness of the client, right? Figuring out what their weakness are, and then just saying the things that they want to hear. It's a bit like populism in politics, right? You have those politicians who, as either right wing or absolute populists, where they say to the people, oh, this is what you're going to get if you elect me, and then that never really happens, right? Because again, there's no way to enforce that contract upon them. I can say in a political campaign anything I want to get me elected, but once I'm elected, how are you going to enforce me doing that? Okay, maybe you can punish me on the next elections, but by then I will just keep on giving you different types of false promises, which we've seen through politics throughout the world quite a lot, unfortunately. And it is, I think, in this age of misinformation, that is quite common. That we use social media, we use quite a lot of other information to just lure people into a deal, or to vote for someone, which is absolutely wrong. And I think in the biggest negotiations fraud that has lately happened, the Theranos situation, I don't know if you heard of it.
Absolutely. We even did a
in the
video about
US.
it.
Everybody heard about it, right? So that is a pure example of a sales pitch that's absolutely fraudulent, right? You create different types of materials that support your claim of how you're going to help and how you're going to do all of these things, and in reality there's literally nothing. I think in Germany we had a similar situation with Wirecard, which was a very large fraud here, and embezzled people's billions, and these Ponzi schemes. That's a little bit negotiations, right? Because at the end of the day, you go into a conversation with someone, regardless of what kind of a type of a salesperson is, and you tell them, I have this amount of money and I want to give it to you, right? So you can invest it, and then I give you absolutely false promises or product, and I sell you products that don't exist. With physical products, it's obviously a completely different story, because physical products, you can actually say, here's a physical product. What has happened lately, I think, in the world is that we have these situations where, we have artificial products like Theranos, right, that don't exist, or softwares that don't exist or don't function. So I don't know how to avoid it, but that's why I say, relationship building is so important. Understanding the other person that's across you, understanding their motives, and understanding what they offer and how truthful is what they offer, right? So that's why in a lot of industries you have this test period, a month or two, where you can actually test the product, see how it works, and if it's really true what is being sold. And I think that's something that's really important.
And talking always of this negotiation, I am imagining a scenario where two unequal partner in business are negotiating, they are going to enter into an agreement. What is going to
Yeah.
guide that type of negotiation? Do we say we have a kind of a universal ethic that is going to guide them so that the weaker one or the lesser one would not be taken advantage of? Because if you are new to the business environment, you don't know how to play. Because the other one that have been there
Yeah.
for a long time know all the rules of the game as against you. So, what is going to be the rule to make sure that this lesser partner or this less experienced business his interest is also protected in the negotiation?
I would love to tell you that the life's fair and business negotiations are fair, but they're not. The simple truth is that it is like that. It's simple like that. You have negotiations for a salary, and me and you maybe have the same talent, and then one of us is gonna get a better salary because he's just able to negotiate better, and that's the reality of life. And that's the same thing when it comes down to deals. You should keep your best negotiators in negotiating deals because that's where you get the most value. I can tell you in every company that I worked, same type of customer, same type of size, different deals, different type of pricing happens all the time. It's really, because at the end of the day, it goes down to the fact of how much is someone willing to pay. Like, let's say a football ticket, right? I want to go and watch Champions League final, and I'm prepared to pay 2,000 euros to get it. I simply am, because maybe I have the money, and I am prepared to pay it. And you are, prepared to pay 250 euros. That's the maximum you can get. To you, maybe that's all the budget you have, right? To me, maybe that's like, I don't know, 1% of my budget. So that's why no negotiation will ever be the same. That's why I say it's so important in negotiations to sit back and listen, see where the red lines are, and then tailor your proposal based on that, rather than you going first with a proposal and saying this is the amount of money you need to pay, otherwise it's not going to happen, because you've set yourself in a trap. Because now if you try to go higher, I'm going to just say, Obehi, you just told me that this cost 10k, why is it now costing 20k, right? Or if you say it cost a 10k, now it's 5k, you're immediately not trustworthy. Why has the price dropped so much, right? What's behind it? So in negotiations, you have to be really, really careful on how you adjust your negotiation strategy. If you go into the negotiation with the wrong strategy and the wrong approach, I'm gonna milk this client out of, I don't know, tens and thousands of dollars, or euros, or whatever you want to. You're probably going to end up on the wrong side of the negotiations, and it's going to fall through. That's why I say you need the best of understanding going to negotiation, best of wishes, in the sense of like, you really want this to happen. You want to secure this customer, and you want to make this deal happen, and then it's easier to negotiate. But if you're going through the motions of like, I'm going to the negotiations and I'm going to get everything out of it, and then the other party is going to lose everything, that's not a basis for a contract. In some cases, you might be successful, you might get away with it, right? You push a deal through, but in most cases, if the parties do not reach a balance in which they're both satisfied, eventually there's a longer term consequences. Short term, you go through the contract, everything is legally done now, right? You have these legally enforceable contracts, that you can just cancel after a year. Most of the SaaS subscriptions are a year or several years, but you can get out of the contracts if you're a powerful enough company with powerful enough lawyers who will probably get out of most contracts without an issue. So to say the life is fair is not fair. So that's why I say the best negotiations are the one where both sides go out absolutely happy and they feel they won, not won over the other party, but they won what they wanted to, right? That's the difference. I can't translate this into football terms, but because in football terms, only a draw is actually the only score that probably both sides are not satisfied with. But you have situations where the opponent is too powerful and you get a draw and you're happy, and the opponent needed that point to be a champion, and that's maybe the ideal case scenario, right? They became champion, you got away with your point. But that's the type of an outcome that you want. You want the outcome where both sides feel like they've gotten the best out of the deal. Not always that easy as it sounds.
So in essence, there is no like kind of routine rules that always guide the negotiation. It's like you always the rules is always fluid continuously.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's always fluid. Always in every single situation, everything can happen. Sometimes you negotiate over certain type of wording. There's like a 3 sentence that needs to be changed. And then you have to go into negotiations with procurement to do that. But at the end of the day, is you need to set yourself up correctly for the negotiations, and this is usually done in the discovery calls, right? You need to ask the questions: is who's going to negotiate, what do you expect in the negotiations, what is going to be the points where we need to negotiate the contract, right? Is it going to be pricing, is it going to be wording, is it going to be data protection parts, is it going to be amendments that need to be added? Am I going to be speaking to procurement guy whose only job is to actually negotiate contracts? Am I going to speak with Obehi, who's a sales guy also, and really just wants the deal concluded and then has to go to legal to double check it? All of these things are important to set you up for the regular type of negotiation. So there are certain commonalities and there are certain fixed approaches, right? Because you need to know that information. But what can happen in the negotiation room or on the negotiation table is never a given. It never is. You don't know. Deals have fallen through because somebody personally dislikes you. We come into a meeting, Obehi, and I promised you something and I didn't deliver it. And then you go to me, why should I trust you? I have to give you 100K, but you don't do what you say you're gonna do. I'm not gonna give you 100K. I don't trust you, and that is a valid reason for negotiations to break down, because it's your money and you need to decide how you're gonna spend it. And if you don't trust are you gonna go buy a car that costs 100,000 euros that you don't trust is gonna go past a year? Probably not, right? The chances that you're going to take that decision are crazy. And that is the same in sales and in negotiations. You need to have a trusted partner on the opposite end, knowing that they will hold to the end of the bargain. And then everything else is negotiable. Everything that stands on that piece of paper is negotiable. Sometimes, certain companies come and they ask for documents that you've never done before. We've had situations where companies ask for proof of solvency. Are you, as a business, because they're multi-billion-dollar companies and they need to sign a contract with you, and you can't prove that you can actually survive the year, so they say, you know what, we want to see if you're solvent. And has that been part of every single negotiation? No. So you never know what's going to come up, right? But that's why you need to go prepared. You need to pre-prepare the field to be able to play the game, right? You need to figure out quite a lot of stuff. Who are you negotiating? How are you planning to negotiate? What particular terms are you going to be negotiating? And when do you expect to get an actual conclusion of the negotiations? Because you need to also put a timeline, right? Otherwise you're just going to end up in negotiations that are going back and forth and nothing ever happens.
Negotiation for or effective negotiation is sales. Now, if you were to list out maybe 3 important skills that somebody need to have for effective negotiation, what are those skills?
I don't know if I'm going to repeat myself based on what I said about effective communication, but it's, I would say, active listening, right? Understanding what is being said, and why is it being said, and where does it lead. Creativity, ability to find a creative solution, because sometimes you really don't have it prescribed. you don't know how to solve it. You've never solved it before. And the right mentality. If you're going in the mentality of, I'm going to make this deal happen, in most cases you will. If you're going with a mentality, this deal is not happening, what you're going to end up is resenting the opposing side that's negotiating. Don't take it personal. None of the negotiations are that personal. Of course, I said previously in my answer, certain deals can fall through because of personal reasons, and partners not trusting themselves. But at the end of the day, it's business, right? So every single person in that meeting, it's a little bit like in politics. Everybody in that meeting is holding their line, right? They're defending something, an interest of their company or a situation in which they're in. They don't have the amount of money that to pay, so they need to negotiate to bring it down to the budget that they actually do. But it's not anything against you. It's just, they want to find a solution, and they're giving you that information, and it's up to you how you creatively solve it.
All right. Now, you, Risto, was there a time that you didn't know how to negotiate properly and then you learned later how to negotiate? What did you do to learn this skill?
There's always a time when you don't know how to negotiate. I mean, I don't think you always know in every situation how to negotiate. I think we confuse negotiations in sales with negotiations in any other part of life. And just because I'm very good at maybe negotiating a sales deal doesn't mean I'm very good at negotiating a salary, or I'm not maybe a political negotiation in order to good in political negotiations, right? Because every single negotiation has a background. In order to negotiate effectively, you need to know the background of the deal, why we're there, what we're trying to achieve, how are we going to try to achieve it, what are our red lines, where we're going to go, etc. I think I learned specifically from experience. I remember back in the day when I was doing my master studies in Bonn 2013. We had an actual subject that was called negotiations, and we were put in a very complicated situation where we had to write a draft paper on how we're going to negotiate and what our positions are going to be, and that actually required extensive research on how to best position. But at the end of the day, it was 3 points that we needed to defend. But in order to defend them, you actually needed to create a very compelling argument. So every single type of negotiations is very different. Political ones from sales ones, absolutely. I think I learned from experience. I was just many times thrown into the deep water. There was like a general frame of where you can move, and then you just need to kind of figure out how to negotiate. I think what really helped me and changed my view was how I approach negotiations, and that happened when I was doing my internship in the European Parliament, because I always considered political negotiations as a zero-sum game. Somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. But when you go to the European Parliament, most of the deals are actually negotiated way before they're voted. And then when the voting comes, it's very official. People just vote, and an actual amendment or like a resolution is really just voted on, and it's usually accepted because it's already pre-negotiated before that. And then everybody there just had they had their own positions, but everybody was always trying to find a solution. And that shocked me. I didn't expect it. I always, as I said, I consider it a zero-sum game. But then when you're there and you see that people who are actually in a position of power, they can negotiate, and they don't have to, but in general resort to finding a solution, you realize that pretty much every problem in life is solvable. Every negotiation can be completed successfully. It's just if there is a desire to negotiate or not. And then after that, it was much easier to negotiate in sales as well. And then at the very beginning, when I started working in sales, I always thought of like, how do we get the best of money out of this deal? But as time went, and I went to several conversations where weren't really bringing us to the right point, I realized that I need to change the mentality. You need to go into the conversation with the opinion, okay, this client wants to sign. How do I get them to sign? What can I do to make this happen? And if you go with that mission, usually you're able to find a solution.
Anyway, I would like to drag the line on the European Parliament, where you see that the vote was already actually done before the negotiation. Anyway, that was. I like political conversation, but that is not for today, and that's why we're going to say.
But it did help me specifically learn how important negotiations are. It did, because you think hey, I'm in a position of power, right? You need to buy my product, so I don't care if this is the price, and take it. It's not really how it works. In certain cases, yes, there's no point wasting the time where the customer isn't prepared to pay what is the minimal value of your product. in that case, you just part ways and you don't negotiate. But in most cases, you are in a situation to bring a solution forward, so why wouldn't you? So once you have that mindset, and once you have that understanding of what negotiations are, it's much easier to then go into the negotiations and get a successful outcome.
Now, let's look at this scenario. Okay, we basically have looked at the two conversation, communication and negotiation in business now. Say, for example, you have a budget which are going to use in sales, and maybe
Yeah.
it's going to respond to either negotiation or communication. I don't know if the two can actually be separated. Which of them would you prioritize for a better sales or for more sales in your business?
I don't think you can do that though. That's absolutely not possible. I mean, without effective communication, you can't actually understand what the customer needs, and you can't effectively negotiate, because negotiations is basically communication, right? You're just telling them where you stand and what your position is, and as I said, if there is no budget that matches what you offer and you don't actually have a margin of earning, most companies will never do a deal, right? And then if the budget is actually doable, then you just define the solution. Like it's a fairly straightforward. It's kind of like a black and white situation. You can't have the one without the other. You can't have effective negotiations if you don't have effective communication. Let's say we're discussing it. Let's say over here I have 10,000, right? That's my budget. Your product cost above 15,000, right? If I come to you and I say I'm willing to pay 10K, and then you say, no, are you crazy? No way, it's 15K or nothing. That's not effective communication. I'm not prepared to pay your price, and you're not prepared to sell. So there's no communication. That's it. It's done. You've just told me that it's not happening. And that's the end of the conversation. That's the end of communication. That's absolutely the end of the negotiations. However, if we come to a situation where you say, you know what, I understand 15K is too much for you. I can't do 10K though. So how do we do it? Now we're opening an effective communication, and now we're opening effective negotiations, because you say to me, look, I'm actually open to find a solution. I trust you. I believe you will be a good customer to me. I can use you as a customer. I'm not gonna maybe make a lot of money on you, but I don't know, maybe your brand as Risto is really important to be in my portfolio, so I can show it off, and then you get a trade-off, right? You get something from me. Or maybe you say, you know what, you have 10K budget this year, but maybe if you're happy with the product, how about you do 20K next year? And this way you get your 15-15, right? So this is now an effective communication, and so these types of solutions is what makes it an effective one, regardless if it's a communication or negotiations. But one without the other does not exist.
Thank you so much. That is so beautiful. I love that. I love that. All right. Now, looking at sales, Risto, what usually are the KPI for your business? How do you measure the effectiveness of what is actually going on there at the end of the day?
You're asking me an extremely fluid question, I have to tell you, and it's very hard to answer because it changes, right? Because let's take it like this. If you're in sales, let's say the company has just started, right? It's a startup. Your first KPI is probably to acquire as many customers as possible, right? You're just trying to bring any kind of revenue. But let's say you're a 10-year company that already has a large portfolio. So your KPIs can be very different. You can have an ARR component, so basically trying to hold or trying to have as many repeat customers as possible, because usually it's much cheaper to retain customers than to acquire customers. And then you can have a KPI based on basically acquiring new customers, right? So it's a very different type of a conversation based on where you stand as an organization. Now let's talk about teams, right? Every team can have different type of KPIs. So if you're in cold acquisition, you have one type of KPI. So that's basically acquiring new customers. If you're a sales team that works with current customers, or an account management team, you have obviously retention target customers, and then portfolio upsells, etc. So those are different types of KPIs. then if you divide it on an individual scale, right? Depending if you're in cold acquisition, warm acquisition, you can have monthly, quarterly, yearly targets. It really is dependent on the situation where you're in, right? Where you are as a maturity of as an organization, where are you on that path? Where is your sales organization in maturity, right? How new it is, how old it is, what kind of operational administrative organization it is, how mature it is, because let's say you're a new joiner in a company, you're probably not going to have a 6 months. In the first 6 months, you're not going to have targets or KPIs, because or you're going to have MBOs which are more focused on you doing standard stuff until you build your pipeline, and then once you've built your pipeline, you're going to have different types of KPIs. I'm generally, when it comes to KPIs, a fan of flexible KPIs. Most organizations do fixed KPIs, so meaning at the beginning of the year we agree on certain types of KPIs, and you need to be able to fulfill those in order for you to get your bonus. The flexible KPIs are adjusted, let's say quarterly, right? And then I tell you, Obehi, you need to sell, I don't know, 20K this quarter, and you agree to that, and then you try to achieve that target. And next quarter, I say, this one is a much busier quarter, and you need to sell 40K. Because technically that's where most customers sign. And then in the summer, maybe everybody goes on vacation and your target goes down, because in August there's literally no one to sell to, so who are you going to sell to? And then let's not forget, right, as a human being, you need to go on vacation, you need to take time off, and you might not be able to do your full 3 months of work or a month of work, so you can't have the same KPI always. But again, that's an organizational decision, usually comes down from either the CEO if it's a smaller organization, or the chief revenue officer. But those things can be adjusted to the organization, and I always recommend to adjust them to the organization, because every single organization has a different setup, and that setup plays such a huge role in how you're going to proceed, that sometimes actual KPIs don't make sense. I've been in organizations where they don't, they're not achievable. I think the sweet spot is where at least 50% of the sales team can achieve those KPIs, because otherwise, you have a demotivated sales force that's not going to really bring you very far.
Now, let's say this company is not really going very far in terms of sales. Say you're not happy with what you're getting from the sales team. Where do you go to review more? What do you need to go to see where the problem is coming from?
I'm a big believer in systems. I want my system to be what I would call it dummy proof. It comes back down from my time when I was working in Royal Caribbean. There was a very big insistence that the system does try to correct you when you're about to do a mistake. That stupid message that you pop up, are you sure you want to do this? And then you have to click yes, and people are like, oh, this is so annoying. It's not, right? There's a reason why that's like that, because if you need to go back to double check to make sure you're not making a mistake. Let's face it, we're human beings, all of us make mistakes. I've done a lot of mistakes. I don't know a person who hasn't done any mistakes. And if you have a system that's built up to encourage you to actually double check, double verify, and helps you to limit the number of mistakes you do, then that's the right type of approach, right? And then leave the solutions to human beings. I want people to be creative in the team, and they define solutions to the problems. But in general, I want them to spend very little time on administrative and operational errors. When it comes to finding a mistake, I always my intention is always to sit down with the people that are not having maybe the best of quarter, more in a formal way, and say, look, how are things going for you? Where do we stand? What do you need to help for me to help you to get to where you want to go? And then obviously see what we can do to change the situation. It could be also an organizational mistake. If it's an organizational mistake, is who do we need to pass it on to? So if it's a product, legal, finance, etc., so that we can improve that process and we can make it fast, agile, and easy to complete. So it's really an analysis. It's a retrospect. I think what I always do myself is I analyze the quarter in retrospect. I go back to it and see what went well and what didn't go well, which the most important part is what didn't go well. Because if something is working, that's good, perfect. But if something isn't working, the question is immediately why. No conclusions. It's the question, why? Why didn't it work? And then if we can find the actual root cause and address it, we've achieved everything that we needed to achieve, because we've solved it for the future situation. So it could be very different types of mistakes that can happen. I think what I've always cherished, and I love when my manager cherishes it, and I hope my team appreciates it as well, is that I never try to blame people for mistakes. Mistakes are such a common thing to happen, unfortunately. They happen, for example, in a football game. In order someone to win, someone has to do a mistake so the other team scores. um, you know it's part of life. You can't have an ideal perfect 90 minutes situation, and you can't have an ideal perfect sales organization. You can't have ideal perfect communication. You can't have an ideal perfect negotiations. Never happens.
Thank you for that. Now, you talked about a zero-sum game before, and I know there are also some people that play the positive sum game. Which game do you play?
I would definitely say positive sum game. I'm not someone who thinks that there is a limited time, limited resources in order to be profitable. Um, I don't believe in the zero sum game, because I've been in sales for too long to know that not every not anybody nobody has to lose. Literally nobody has to lose. It's actually together you're much stronger, right? As partners, I'm helping you, Obehi, make money because you're getting your ROIs, right? You're making more money. I'm driving more traffic to your stores. I'm helping you win more customers. And you are actually paying me for that. So I'm earning money because you're successful. The more successful you are, the more prone you are to come and buy products from me. So let's say I've sold you something for 10K. Again, my favorite 10K. I don't know why I'm fixated on the
But take
10K today that
it
much.
is good, though.
Yeah. Um, um, and then you bought that product from me, right? And you earned 100K. So I come next year and I say, you know what, Obehi, last year you bought products worth of 10K. But if you buy products for 10K more, you're gonna make more money. So what's your response gonna be on that?
Good one.
Right? Sweet deal. Sweet deal. I'm winning,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I'm making my money. So there's, I think, enough business to go around for everyone. I mean, the world is over 7 billion. It's never been this big. I think I read somewhere that Africa is now currently the leading market in the world because it has the most young people in the world by continent by far. So it's the youngest population. So it means that it's going to be a booming market. So if I can't sell my product to someone in Europe, maybe I should go to Africa. If I can't sell my product in Europe, maybe I should go to Asia. Like you have China and India who are 1.5 billion. That is a huge amount of markets. So we need to think about more of, how do I translate my value across markets? Rather, how do I take the money from somewhere and do someone and do nothing? Like if the European market is too small and that's 500 million, maybe go to another market. But if you're not providing value, you're not successful long term. That has to stick to any company's mind. If you're not, if you can lie to people sometime, but you can't lie to all people all the time.
That's so good. Thank you so much, Risto. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the sharing here. Now, tell people how can they find you and also benefit from the services that you offer. That is important also.
I think anybody who wants to speak to me in terms of helping their organization improve their processes, improve their operational side, they can reach out to me. I actually have that on my website. It's Risto Gjorgjiev at .com, right? It's my name, last name. They can reach out there to me and we can do a project. We can do any type of training sessions that they would like to, anything that has to do with white space analysis, KPI analysis, preparing strategies for their organization, where they move the organization, how to make it leaner, agile, how to train, mentor, coach, bring the organization to a level where it needs to be successful. All those types of services I'm more than willing to help with. It's very easy to reach me. They can reach me on LinkedIn as well. Absolutely open to cooperation. I think I can bring quite a lot of value to potential customers, such as organizations or individual teams. And I think I have valuable experience to share from all the years and all of the the bad things that have happened to me and all the mistakes I've done, because I've learned quite a lot from them. And always open to also learn, because every organization is different. So undertaking a project to change something within an organization also helps me, from the point of, as a personal and professional growth. I learn how to deal with situations that I didn't have before, or how to make an organization tick and work better, because I'm thrown into a situation where I need to figure out, understand, analyze how it works, and then find a solution.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That is what most many businesses need today. We need to be open for growth, and of course, we don't have any option not to. Otherwise, we get out of business.
Absolutely. If you're not going forward, you're going backwards. That's one of my mottos for me personally when it comes to educating myself, improving myself, working on my professional development. Once you stop and you stand in the same place, the world will pass you by.
Absolutely.
The world is not, like, business is not waiting for anyone. Knowledge is not waiting for anyone. If you're not expanding your horizons, somebody else is.
Absolutely.
Like today you're doing your podcast, tomorrow somebody else is going to do this type of podcast.
Absolutely.
Today I'm leading this organization, but tomorrow they can fire me and then somebody else will lead this organization. Life never stops. It's the beauty of it is you never know what to expect tomorrow, because if you're in a bad situation, it could be better. If you're in a good situation, maybe it's not that good because tomorrow can be bad. But life is beautiful because it's unpredictable.
That's lovely. That's lovely. All right, Risto, what would be your final thought here? We talked about effective communication and negotiation. It says, of course, people have glued themselves to the end of this part in the conversation. How do you want to leave them?
I would like to say, first, thank you for the time. It's been a very lovely conversation. Thank you for giving me the platform to talk about these types of topics, to tell my story, to discuss all of these important topics. I would say always focus on improvement, on a personal level. Always try to learn. And the most important thing that I think we lose quite a lot when we're kids, never lose curiosity, right? I myself am curious in a lot of things. Sometimes it distracts me because I'm doing something and then I have to Google and understand what a certain topic is. But curiosity is literally how you go forward in life. Listen to podcasts, read to books, watch documentaries, talk to people. Find rooms where you're not the smartest person in the world, and find a mentor. And that will help you go forward in life, but always keep moving.
Thank you so much for that. That is a good advice. That is a good advice.
I hope quite a lot of people take it and use it. It's been really good for me. I was lucky enough that I've always, wherever I've gone, I've gotten someone as a mentor who has really helped me grow. That's why I always gladly take the role of a mentor to someone, because if I can help and share knowledge, I will gladly do it. Knowledge does not get wasted because you share it. It amplifies.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Risto.